I'm a big advocate of silver versus gold. If you're able to store it, uh, man's ratio of 80 to 1 versus God's ratio of 10 to 1, that's what it comes out of the ground at. Silver, that ratio will approach 10. Does it get to 40, 30, 20? Does it get to 10? I don't know. But silver is way undervalued to gold, and there's way more bang to the buck in silver than there is in gold. As far as a gold price is concerned, I'm not going to give you a price, and I'm not going to give you a time. Do I think it will be this year? Will be the kickoff where paper breaks and no longer can shackle the price. And as far as price is concerned, all I'm going to say is you're probably going to add zeros to the back end of the gold price, and it's going to go to a price that no one has thought of. You two will be you'll be blown away. And the reason I say this is once the derivatives are broken and no longer price gold, we have no idea how much. Remember, we're talking about a US dollar gold price now. So we have no idea how much gold the US actually has. They claim 8,300 tons, but there's not been an audit since 1956. So there's one of your two variables. The other variable is how much money supply is going to be created over the next, 8 months to the end of the year. You don't have the numerator and you don't have the denominator, so you can't forecast the price. And then you've got to add in the fact that you've got all this capital that had been created by credit. It's trying to get out of the system and into a gold market, which is like trying to run Niagara Falls through a garden hose. So as far as the price goes, you're saying 2,500. It could be 25,000. It could be 25 million. It could be 25 billion. Who knows? And you could laugh at me all you want, but just look at Weimar Germany, where the Reichmark went from 170 Reichmarks for 1 ounce of gold in, I think it was 1918, and by 1923 it was 3.7 trillion Reichmark per ounce. So, and that's where we are now. We are at the end of an empire. The currency is going to go away, where a cup of coffee might be a couple $1,000s. Who knows? Gold and silver are the only two money on the planet that cannot bankrupt. That's the reason you move to gold and silver now, because the world collectively is right in the throes of bankrupting across the board. You're going to see a domino effect where one entity goes out of business, and that causes more, and that causes more. You're going to see a global bankruptcy, and the only thing left standing that is not bankrupted will be gold and silver. And if you go back 100 years, go back 50 years, go back 25 years, and I use that time span because 100 years ago the world was still using gold as money. It circulated. Then 50 years ago, Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard August of 1971, and we went to a total fiat currency that has no backing whatsoever. But think about this from the standpoint of, if you were an investor and you were invested in stocks, or you were invested in bonds, and you thought interest rates were going to go up and you wanted to move out of bonds, or you thought the real economy was going to slow down and you wanted to move out of stocks, what did you do? You moved into cash. 100 years ago, cash was real money. So if you moved into gold or silver, you were completely safe because you knew that the gold and silver could not bankrupt. In today's world, if you are bearish and you move into cash, what did you do? All you did was you moved sideways. You're still inside the system. And what says that your bank or your money market cannot bankrupt, cannot default? Now, yes, you can move directly into treasuries, but what you're promised in return are dollars. And what happens if in that 3 months or 6 months or a year that you bought the T-bills for, what happens if the dollar loses 25, 50% or more in purchasing power? What I've just done is outlined why when you're bearish, when you're fearful, scared, whatever, and you want to move to cash, that cash has got to be gold or it has to be silver, because they cannot bankrupt and they will not devalue. But they don't want to share with the general public because they don't want to start a stampede. And it's pretty simple why they're diversifying into gold. They know it cannot bankrupt, and they also know that it's going to be marked up many-fold, and that will either completely cover other losses or help to cover other losses. They're acting in their own best interest is what they're doing. Let me ask you this. Even in the last 20, 30 years, I mean, think about the invasions that have happened. The U.S. invaded Iraq, went into Libya, went here, went there. What's the first thing they take? The gold.
The gold, yeah.
They don't take the currency. They don't take the currency because they know they've destroyed the currency. It's now worth zero. But guess what? The gold still has value. And that's the first thing they take. I mean, I've said for the last 5 or 6 years, when people ask me, how much gold, how much silver should I have? My standard answer is whatever you don't want to lose. And it goes back to, I think, the very first thing we talked about on this interview is that gold and silver cannot bankrupt in a world that is bankrupting. So how coveted will the only two things that cannot bankrupt be when everything else is collapsing around? And where does that capital go if somebody gets out of treasuries or stocks or what have you, and they're looking for the safest of safe havens? Where does that capital go? It has to go into gold or it has to go into silver.
Bill, do you honestly believe we got 8,300 tons of gold in this country?
Well, no, I don't, and I've talked about this for 15 years now. The United States the West Point, Fort Knox, Denver, the vaults have not been audited since, I think it was 1956. I know it's in the 1950s.
Yeah, I think it's 56.
So why would you not have an audit each year?
Right.
And I think they've given the same reason that they stopped publishing M3 money supply, 5, 6, 7 years ago. It costs too much. Well, really, you can spend $1 billion on a bridge to nowhere, but you can't afford to do an audit. It makes zero sense at all, and the only reason you would not have an audit is because you can't prove that you have what you say you have.
Well, and then some people are saying, you can handle this budget deficit and all we're in debt by 31 trillion just by revaluing the gold that the United States has, because it's valued at $41 an ounce on the books. Just revalue it. Well, here's the problem, Bill. And so you would think, hey, that's a pretty easy solution. But here's the problem, Bill. You got to have the gold, because you can't say it's worth $2,000 an ounce or $5,000 an ounce rather than $41 an ounce if you can't prove that you have the physical asset.
Right. Well, and here's the thing, and I haven't done the math in, 3 years. I think the last time I did the math was 2019. In order to, assuming we have the 8,300 tons, if you revalued gold higher to a point where it would pay off the national debt, back then, 3 years ago, you'd have to have $125,000 an ounce. Mm-hmm. The number now is well north of $150,000 per ounce. And what would that do? What type of inflation would we have? And understand what that means is the dollar completely collapsed against real money, and it would completely collapse against real stuff, up to and including, a lowly cup of coffee. A cup of coffee would probably be $200.